So good afternoon. What are you all doing here? Yeah, we are always looking to wake up, right? A little bit more, a little bit more, and a little bit more. Sometimes people have very sudden. I have two people have written to me and told me about awakening experiences that they had that came quite suddenly and unexpectedly, and have kind of stayed with them ever since, especially when it comes like that. It tends, even if you kind of lose it, you don't really lose it. How could you forget an expansion that is that great? You could never lose it, but we're trying to get to the point of, so this, the poet of who's going to be here next Sunday is talking about non-dualism, right? So non-dualism is this place where we want to get where there's nothing opposite to us, nothing opposite from God. Only God is here, and only God is present, and God is now, and you are very, very much a part of that.
So could you tell us any difference? Is there any difference between non-duality and Course in Miracles, or you say it's all both same?
It's the same. Okay, the Course is a non-dualistic system. What we mean by a non-dualistic system, the Course is all there is God, period. Okay? And as I was saying, you are a part of God. You can't help be a part. You are, in Course in Miracles terms, the Son of God. Now don't worry about the use of the masculine term. Okay, a child of God if you want to say child of God, or daughter of God if you want to say daughter of God, because that's a duality right there. You know? So we kind of have this problem because we only have one thing. By that I mean there's only one mind. And that one mind has always been a part of the one mind. So what we're looking to do is to bring our mind back to the mind, at which point we will have a whole mind, or we will have the experience of one-mindedness. That's why the foundation that David Fishman and I work with is called the One Mind Foundation, because we're really trying to help, we're trying to remember that ourselves, and everyone is trying to remember that. It's not, because the moment you have duality, you've got self and other, you've got an argument, I'm right, you're wrong, we have a problem, right? You're black, I'm white, you're white, I'm black, I mean, you're this other religion, you're Catholic, I'm not Catholic. I mean, whatever it is, I mean, seeing differences is a real problem, right? It's not seeing the difference. There is no difference, and God has no favorite children. There's no such thing, or a child. There's no such thing as a favorite child. We're all absolutely equal in God's sight. Unfortunately, in this world, in space and time, we have these things we call an ego, which is also something that doesn't exist, because how could there be an ego? I mean, how could there be something which is separate from God? There's not. That's why this is an illusion. It's an illusion that we could dream a dream in which there was no God. Not possible. So we're looking to literally awaken. When all of the masters, when they come to their revelations, what is their experience? Their experience is that they have awakened, right? They now see it. They're aha, you know. Sometimes that's what part of it. Some of the koans in Zen Buddhism are trying to get you to an aha, and if it's really a good aha, it's a really aha. I mean, you see kind of the absurdity, the whole idea of thinking that you could be separate. How could you be separate from the wholeness of God? We kind of got into that real quick, so actually there were a couple of announcements that I wanted to make first, so let me make some of these announcements, and then we'll get into our topic for today. Here we are in September of 2019. If you're watching this after October of 2019, and what I'm about to say doesn't count, but there's going to be a conference in North Carolina in October, Columbus Day weekend, which is interesting because we have the Course in Miracles. The Course in Miracles is like this gem. It's like the bright star in God's heaven in terms of understanding what non-dualism is, but understanding the truth from a very sophisticated psychological point of view. Now, I'm not surprised to hear that there are other people who have begun to receive the same kinds of information that we find in the Course, but it's coming in a different way insofar as, well, they're a different person. Helen was a Ph.D. psychologist, professor at Columbia College of Physicians and Surgeons here in New York. I think it's very important that Helen kind of got this voluminous work to start with because it shows us such incredible depth of understanding. That's why I still, after all these years of reading the Course, I bet it happened several times this week in preparing for today's presentation, there were several times I was reading the Course and I said, oh, wow. Oh, wow. Oh, wow. You know, what were Steve Jobs' last words before he died? Oh, wow, oh, wow, oh, wow. Okay, well, there's the oh, wow. It's still happening because, oh, my God, look at that. If that is true, then that means whatever it means. It means that I am a part of God, that you're a part of God, that we all, whatever, right? But there's this oh, wow. So anyhow, there are other books that we come now. We have A Course of Love, and what's going to be happening at this conference is there's going to be other people there who are going to be teaching. One of my latest that I've been trying to read each of the different people that are going to be there, and I really wind up listening to it more than reading it because my wife says I don't read books. Because I listen to books. But sometimes I like this book. This is by Gina Lake, called The Jesus Trilogy. I listened to this and it was so good I bought it and started underlining it because here's the same thing. In fact, is Jesus. I can't believe he did this. The third chapter in this book was the book I was going to write. And I can't. I'm reading this, but this is what I was going to write. Yeah? I don't know Jesus, but anyhow. I guess you can. I'm sure that when I get around to finishing, it'll be different. Here's one that nobody even knows about that's so much like the Course in Miracles. It's amazing. This speaker is not going to be there. It's called From the Christ Mind. It's book 1 and book 2. This is by a guy who is really not known. By that I mean there's actually, it says this book is by Jesus of Nazareth, right? Well, look, Jesus is doing an awful lot of writing these days. I mean, he's just really, really busy. But then, you know, Jesus is ubiquitous. I mean, why? Jesus speaks to you. Lesson 49 from A Course in Miracles, God's voice speaks to me all through the day. So it's speaking to you and to anyone who's listening. And by the way, the name doesn't have to be Jesus. You know, if you live in the Orient, it's quite possible that you're listening to another. You're listening to Ananda, or you're listening to some other name. Names are just forms. They're just ways of putting labels on things, right? It's significant in the Western world. This is the most respected name, or one of the most respected names. It could be Muhammad. It could be a whole lot of other things. That, you know, after all, Muhammad said that he didn't write the Quran, right? It was given to him. He was sitting in a cave meditating, and he hears recite. So he recited the Quran, right? So this is by Darrell Morley Price, and it's such a good book. It sounds like this is Jesus all the way through. I mean, I don't seem to doubt that. It's sort of interesting about this because there's nothing in here. There's no email. There's no website. He just got this, right? But he's not trying to do a big promotion kind of thing on it, which I think is very, very interesting to see that kind of thing can be happening too. And it's going to be continuing to happen. What was it? I want to introduce Arthur here for a moment. Art, stand up for a second. Art is a good friend, has been since 2004. He's going to be leading us in a chant when we start our second session today. Art is a yoga teacher, meditation teacher, Tai Chi teacher, personal trainer, sometimes actor, singer, and a very good friend. And Art's going to start us off. But what would you say that Rod said about the 3% or the 4%? It coming down the car today?
He said that.
Oh, use the mic. I'm sorry, you've got to use the mic.
1, 2. I got it on.
Put the button on.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, good.
Rod Schellberg, I spent some time in Maine with him just recently, and he said that the world has turned toward the light. And in his estimation, he says it's turned 4 degrees toward the light. That's what he said. And he used an analogy of a aircraft carrier ship. It's when an aircraft carrier ship gets going, it needs 3 miles in order to stop. So something that big takes up, once it gets moving, it's hard to stop it. So if the planet is moving in this direction of the light, even if it's just 4 degrees, if it's moving in that direction, it's going to be hard to get it to stop from moving in that direction. You know? And as I meditated on it, at first I thought, well, 4 degrees ain't a lot. You know, I've been leading meditation groups and stuff since the 90s. And I said, so we get 4 degrees. But small degrees can make big differences.
All right. I think it's, I started teaching classes at the New School University, which is just down the street on 14th Street, just a few blocks from where we are, in 1969, right? It's now 2019, so that was 40-some years ago, right? And I was teaching courses on consciousness expansion and religious experience. I still have flyers and things from that time. 69 was Woodstock. 69 was the pop. You know what the song was that year? This is the dawning of the age of Aquarius.
It's actually 50
that
years
was,
ago.
huh?
It's 50 years ago.
50 years, yeah. Yeah, sure. Making it shorter than, 50 years ago, right? So that, and Hair opened on Broadway. And for those of us who were living here in New York in the 60s in Greenwich Village, which is where we are, it was quite a time, right? Well, it's continued. It kind of got, things go forward and back and forward and back. So, but there is something happening. I have no doubt about the fact that there's a change that's going on. And we're fortunate to be part of it, but everybody's a part of it, right? And we're going to see that this is going to continue to grow like this. We're grateful that we have these wonderful guidebooks to help us in this process. So anyhow, if you're around and you can come to North Carolina, go to our website, which is miraclesmagazine.org, and you can see about coming down there if you can work that out. A couple other announcements that I want to make. This is live stream. I've also started a class on Tuesday evenings, a Zoom class, which is so, I travel a lot. I go to places, I do work, but you got to rent a car and get on an airplane and then park and then pay for parking. And, I go off, I make $3,000 or $4,000 and I come home and I've made $400 or $500 because of all the expenses that are involved in it. This is nice. You just sit in front of your computer and we can talk to each other. And anyhow, if you're interested in a Tuesday evening class, we're leaving it completely open. By that I mean join anytime. Even though we stop every 6 weeks, take a little breather. This week is going to be a breather week for us. We're going to start again on September 17th. But as I said, you can start anytime. It's similar to what we do here, except it's shorter. It's an hour and a half, and it's directly online. So that's another opportunity to be learning this material. I think that's most of the announcements. Rod, I could have mixed Rod and Art is going to lead us in a chant when we begin the second session today, which I think you'll find very interesting. One of the things, I used to be a Protestant minister, And one of the things that I miss is the singing. But chanting is another way of getting the mind into a set where we can become more receptive to this information. So let's start. So also, I announced the topic of special relationships for today, and then I started working on preparing for this. And this happens a lot, I've noticed. It's that I'll start on one idea, and that leads to another idea, which leads to and the next thing you know, I'm fleshing out a different idea, even though I still want to stick to a main idea. So today, I really have two basic ideas. I think we'll try to do one idea around to lunchtime. Lunchtime. Where to get lunch? Some of you may go have lunch. We just have to the break time, which is at 2:45. And then we'll come back at 4 and we'll do the second idea. The second idea is going to be on special relationships. The first idea is what you're going to see on the screen right now, and that is, think but an instant on this. Your relationships are with the universe. All of our relationships are with it. That's another way of saying that our relationships are all with God. It's really getting in good with God, and I don't mean by doing some sort of special flavor or asking for prayers, but trying to follow the guidance that God is trying to give us. We can really just, thy will be done, right? And what the ego says is, my will be done. Well, okay, God says, fine, go ahead, do it your way, but in the long run, I know you're going to come around to my will, because it's the only thing that's going to make you happy. You can run off, you can get all the worldly possessions you want, you can buy islands and have sex and do everything that you want to do, but there's so much of an end that comes to that, right? Let's go on. So, God gave the sonship to you to ensure your perfect creation. This was His gift, for as He withheld Himself not from you, He withheld not His creation. Nothing that ever was created but is yours. Think about that line. Nothing that was ever created. I mean, you already have everything. And what you have is the one thing which cannot be destroyed or ever taken away from you, which is love. And I'm not talking about what we're going to talk about later as special love. But you have the love of God. And if the love of God is filling your heart, it's going to flow over. And it's going to go toward other hearts as well, and they will feel that. And then there's like this magnetic attraction where it comes back to you, right? So, anybody that has a near-death experience and experiences this level, we're going to come back and talk about how it's the most incredible experience. And they actually didn't even want to come back, But those who do come back always come back for a reason. There was a mission they had to partly, often just to tell about what happened. That's the reason they come back. Look, I saw this, and you can see this too. It's perfectly possible to have this experience. So your relationships are with the universe. I think in a way the universe is a good way of thinking about it's God. Let's go to this next quote. These are all from the Course. This universe, being of God, is far beyond the petty sum of all the separate bodies you perceive. It's not about bodies. For all its parts are joined in God through Christ, where they become like to their Father. Christ knows of no separation from His Father. Christ knows of. So in that sense, you are the Christ. What Jesus represents is simply someone who got this, who understood. He was awakened. He had an awakening that he then turned around and tried to tell to the people of his time. I'm talking about the historical Jesus now, but he continues. I mean, why stop? You know, there's another possibility, and at another point, I could show you lots of other periods when there have been like books that came from that same kind of source. Actually, if you want to go back to the very, very, very beginning, way before Jesus, the Rig Veda from 1700 BC is a non-dualistic document which is telling us about the same thing, right? And we don't even have an author on that because it's believed that that came from the divine mind.
I just wanted to offer an observation. Forgive me, I get nervous when I have to speak.
That's okay.
The question from Yasko, and also what I love about your teaching is that though it's centered on the Course in Miracles, you draw from many sources. And with regard to what you just said, the Vedas, the principle, one of the main principles in the Advaita, the non-duality, is what they call the Sanatana Dharma, which is the central universal teaching that emerges in different times and different places according to the necessity of the culture in which it's given. And it seems the Course in Miracles is right for this time, for us. But essentially it's the same teaching, like you were describing.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Oh, appreciate it. That's really, really true. You want to pass the mic up to Hannah here? Okay.
I just wanted to add what you said about that every time that you read the Course, you go, whoa, I never read this before. And one time that was happening to me, and I asked the Course, how is it that I have read this about 8 times, and suddenly I got something else? And I saw I wasn't on anything, I was straight. And I saw the Course going like this, the energy of the Course.
Like a wave?
And I got it, yes. And I got, because the Course is evolutionary. And that's why it never ends.
Right. Actually, I think what's evolutionary, the Course is evolutionary, but we are evolutionary. The mind is evolutionary, so a lot of people pick up the Course and they say, this is just Greek. I don't understand this. It doesn't make any sense at all. And then 10 years later, they pick it up, and all of a sudden, it didn't make sense. Suddenly, it does start making sense. But this is a very deep well. I mean, it is such a deep well that you can just keep exploring this, and with every aha, you're seeing something deeper, and it's helping us in a way we should be glad they're awaking slowly, because if it awoke too suddenly, it literally could be overwhelming. And that may actually be what happens with some people who do wake up too suddenly. They get overwhelmed, and the next thing you know, they're in a mental hospital saying, I'm Jesus Christ. and yes, right. And everybody else is saying, yeah. Because they didn't know how to do a proper kind of introduction of that information. Yes.
John, you spoke about how things are getting better. I see that a
Sure.
lot of people waking up. I was on the subway the other day, and this woman came in and started ranting against a particular group of people. And, I was like, oh my God. And, being a New Yorker, when not to say anything.
Sure.
So I started to pray, and this young woman next to me, she says, are you okay? I says, I'm praying. And we got into a conversation, and then the person left, and then across the row, another person got into our conversation, and I quoted Mary Ann, there are more people who love, but the people who hate with conviction. And we got to love with conviction. It felt so good. Of course, there are more people who do love.
Right. That's a great quote from Marianne, by the way. Right? So did I finish this quote? I don't think I did. Let me go back and start with Christ. All right. Christ knows of no special separation from his Father. There's no separation between any of us and the wholeness of God, who is his one relationship in which he gives as his Father gives to him. That's what I was saying about the more you give it, the more it comes back. It's a wonderful principle. Right? As you give, so do you receive. So there's no illusion in heaven where only truth abides. We are literally trying to reach heaven by transcending our own specialness and the mundane, material, ego-driven world which dominates our thinking. If that's all there is this mundane, materialistic, ego-driven world, then we have reason for despair. But of course, that's not all there is, so we have no reason for despair. We're trying to understand how to live here knowing only peace. Now, what we know, what's happening with all of us is that we have split minds. We're still living with divided minds. We watch the news and we get frustrated. We get angry. We get upset. Things bother us. We worry about finances or whatever kind of stuff it is that we worry about. That doesn't have to be there. So we're still kind of working our way out of the illusion. It's actually a good analogy is, you know how you wake up in the morning and then you fall back to sleep, and you wake up and then you fall back, and then you keep kind of going dozing. You know, it's kind of like we're dozing, kind of like we're going in and out until you eventually get to the point where you have got to put your feet on the floor. You know, you got to go ahead and start living it, or we're looking about living it. As it is, it seems as though we are imprisoned in bodies in a complex and often chaotic and confusing world. Again, all you got to do is watch the news to look like it's a pretty complex and confusing world. That's what's going on the outside, but there's something much deeper that's going on. So illusions will not last. That's good news. Dreams come to an end. Their death is sure, and this alone is certain in their world. It is the ego's world because of this. What is the ego but a dream of what you really are, right? A thought you are apart from your Creator. It's the idea that you can be separate, not just from the Creator, but from each other, which would make us separate from the Creator as well. And wish to be what He created not. It is a thing of madness, not reality at all. Okay? And let's go on. Judgment. So one of the basic characteristics of the ego is that the ego is a judge. All right? Now, you know, first of all, you can't help being a judge because we all do it all the time. All right? So we just reckon, we look around, we're good, pretty, ugly, nice, bad, you know, that's just a characteristic of consciousness. The problem is whether or not we make that a problem. If I say it shouldn't be that way, if that's my judgment, if the judgment is you should change, you should be somebody else, you should not be wearing all those silly tattoos or whatever it is, you know, then now we're trying to say that something is wrong on the outside with the world. And the world is what it is, right? So let's go back to this. Judgment is but a toy, a whim, the senseless mean to play the idle game of death. The death is, by the way, the death of reality, really, of the true reality, and your imagination. But vision sets all things right, bringing them gently within the kindly sway of heaven's laws. There are certain laws. We've looked at them in the past. I mentioned one of the most basic law there is in the universe just a few minutes ago. Most basic law there is in the universe is the law of cause and effect. What goes around comes around. As you give, so do you receive. As you take, so is it taken from you. As you hurt another, you hurt yourself. I mean, all this is a basic principle. Right? What if you recognize this world as an hallucination? In other words, it's a dream. We're making it up. And we're making it up collectively. Actually, there's two dreams. There's what the Course calls the secret dream, and then there's the dream that we dream in concert, right? The dream we dream in concert is what's on the evening news. The secret dream are the wishes and the fantasies and the stuff we've got going on inside ourselves that we don't share with other people. We wish things were different. We have fantasy dreams about other people, or maybe who they should be, or who we will be in the future, or rehearsing something that happened in the past. That's all that seems to be locked within the context of our own minds, and it's not something that we share. That's why it's a secret dream, right? What if you understood you made it all up? So the ego is not real right now. It never was or will be. It's not something which exists in time. So it doesn't exist at all. It has no reality. The ego tries to exploit all situations into forms of praise for itself. That's one of the main ways that we see the ego acting out in the world. And we know that when we do it ourselves, within ourselves. And we all very often feel guilty about the fact that we do that, because it's a form of separation from the other, right? I'm better than you for some other, whatever reason, smarter, prettier, we're richer, whatever it is, all of which is nonsense, because there's no difference. Let me read that second. The ego tries to exploit all situations into forms of praise for itself. In order to overcome its doubts, it will remain doubtful as long as you believe in its existence. This is really, as long as you believe in its existence, what you actually want to get to, and what the mystics get to, and what the enlightened folks get to, is actually to a place of no self. That's a very scary place in the mind of the ego. In reality, that's where you want to be, because it's the only place which is completely peaceful and unperturbed. But it's just a state of beingness, or a state of awareness, or a state of presence, right? That's all it is, just being there, right? As long as you believe in its existence, you who made it cannot trust it, because in your right mind, you realize it's not real. So again, that's a part of the split mind. We have a split mind. There's this ego thing, but then there's also the real mind. But the real mind is the mind which is connected with God. The Course refers to it as your right mind. We all have wrong minds and right minds. What we're trying to do is to get more right-minded as time goes by and less wrong-minded. One of the ways that you can work on doing that is by learning how to give up addictions. I don't care what the addiction is, but any addiction, as the ego is the thing which holds the addiction. And the ego says, I have to have this food, this drink, this sex, this obsessive compulsive behavior, this whatever it is that I have to have, right? Which is not true. Well, we want to get up to the point where we completely let it all go. All of it go. But even if you begin in some small way, if you want to you give an addiction. Just pick an addiction, all right? An addiction is probably something that you do every day that you rather wish that you didn't, all right? That'd be one of a variety of definitions that we could have for addiction. Something you think that you cannot not do, right? But you feel guilty when you do it. So what if I didn't do this? What if I didn't have this thought? Maybe it's just a thought. Maybe it's just a compulsive behavior. Right? What if I didn't have this? Well, it's perfectly possible, because people do give up alcohol. People do give up drugs. People do give up the obsession with eating whatever it is that it is. Or give up anger, give up attack thoughts, give up being annoyed. Just one of the basic teachings in the Course, so important. You've heard me say it many times before. Let him be who he is. Let it be what it is. Let the situation be what it is. That's learning how to just live in the present. Right? Now, this next quote from the Course, I'm going to read this differently. You see, I put the word we and us in there in different places. So the Course, I'm going to read it slightly different. I'm going to put the we in instead of the special, or whatever, the they or the them. Okay, so you can see it. You can see what the Course says, and you just can see the way I'm going to read it. We are all asleep, surrounded by a world of loveliness that we do not see. Peace, freedom and peace and joy stand there beside the bier on which we sleep, and call us to come forth and waken from our dream of death. Yet we hear nothing. We are lost in dreams of specialness. Open your eyes a little. See the Savior God gave to you, that you might look on him and give him back his birthright. It is yours. It is your birthright. Kind of like changing it just a little bit. It doesn't make it so objective. It makes it more subjective in terms of what this experience is saying. Let's go on with this. So A Course in Miracles is truly a mystical document insofar as it's trying to help us to reach this higher level of knowing and being. It's trying to move us out of the realm of just perception. So it's not a matter of just perception, because perception is where the judgment is. If we can step beyond the perception, beyond the judgment, then it's just, as I said a moment ago, presence, which transcends the insanity of this world. Even though you may see the insanity of the world, but you're not making judgments about the insanity. The insanity of the world has always been there. Always been there. In fact, if what Art was just talking about, what Rod was talking about, we truly are experiencing an awakening. It's been a very long, slow process of awakening. Actually, if you want to look back in history, you can see. Think about where the black man was in this country 100 years ago, right? I mean, it's been a long, long evolution, but we are making progress. We are. So, beyond, let's see, where did I leave? Present. Beyond let me start at the bottom. I should stop where there's a period. I'm going to read the last part. It is trying to help us wake from the ego's dream of death. It's a dream of death because it's a dream that something is real which is not real. You see why that makes it death? Right? Because it's not really being alive. Even our thoughts of memories is not what's real. We had these past experiences, right? We thought that they were real, and in some sense in space-time at that point it was, but it's not here now. So it's a dream that I have in my mind about my childhood, for example. I dream about my childhood. And of course, actually what happened was not like anything like your dream is. Because we color our dreams with nice or not so nice or whatever it is that we're putting onto them. As life in the realm of the ego is a dream, a fantasy, and illusion. So, this is actually, Jesus looks a little sad here, but I don't think he's sad. I mean, this is one of my favorite paintings of Jesus. This is in the wilderness, Jesus in the wilderness. I don't know who painted this. It's actually, this is not a good copy of it because it's a little fuzzy. But I just see him here as deep in thought and seeing. And this is the level of depth of thought that we all have to go to. As far as our being the Christ, let's remember, and this is from the Course, there is nothing about me that you cannot attain. I have nothing that does not come from God. The difference between us is now that I have nothing else. This leaves me in a state which is only potential in you. So we all have this potential. We all have this potential to remember, to see what he saw, to remember what he remembered, and to awaken just as he awakened. It's right there. It's very close, actually. I mean, it's as close as your mind itself, right? Which is not the brain, but the mind, which can awaken at any point. That's another way away. When I got here today, Yasko told me that she's just been in Japan, and her parents are quite old. I think they're both in their 90s or 80s or 90s. Their 90s, I think. And that she had taken them to see 5 different doctors for different reasons, right? And every one of these 5 different doctors told her that it was something in the mind, that it was about mind healing. Right? It's about seeing differently. I thought that's wonderful. We need to get more Western medicine thinking about, the Course in Miracles says everything is of the mind and in the mind. And if you can see it, that changes everything, right? All right. What was it you were telling in the car? Was it Brad coming down about, oh yeah, if you have a split personality, one can be allergic and the other, who was talking about? Oh yeah, tell us that. Use a microphone to do it. Got to have a mic. Stand apart. You got to see them.
I think we're talking about the power of belief.
Mm-hmm.
And I was speaking about studies from Dr. Bruce Lipton, a schizophrenic personality. So a person in one personality may have a peanut allergy, but when they shift to another second personality, they can eat peanuts all day with no effect. And so what that demonstrates is the power of belief and how the mind literally can shift things.
Great. That's a very good illustration, isn't it? So our minds tend to run into these ruts where you think, for example, that there's some problem that you couldn't overcome, but you could. The mind could overcome it. You got to have the mic. Pass it down to.
How do you explain the schizophrenic shift and split when scientifically, when the person that has, for example, 2 personalities, Marty is talking and this part of the brain is being activated, and then the person shifts to Peter and another different part of the brain is activated? Can you explain in terms of the Course how that is possible?
No. But that's a very good illustration of how we can shift the mind. So maybe I wouldn't know about something like that. But let's say, so I can shift from my ego mind into my right mind. That's a very good illustration of that. So we're all schizophrenic in that sense, right? And we can all learn how to make this shift just by practicing that. That's why we have 365 lessons.
Are you saying then that the mind will produce a different vibration in the brain? I mean, that we can shift the vibration.
I suppose so, but
Like, for example, there was a fantastic study about this person who was an atheist. No, I don't believe in God, I don't believe in God. And so there was one person said, I live in God. I don't believe in God, I know God. And so they took brain scans of both of them, and they realized that the person who was in God had a different part of the brain was activated. And when they put electrodes on the guy that was an atheist, and they shifted the vibration of the brain, they did something for that part of the brain to get activated, the guy said, "Oh my God, oh God, I see God." Yeah, I can see what you mean.
Wonderful.
So
So I have no doubt. The Course said that the brain is just a computer in terms of the Course, right? The mind is something which transcends the brain altogether. But we think of the brain, nevertheless, I'm not surprised to hear that something shifted. But what shifted, what was Yasko talking about with their parents? It's the belief, it's the mind that shifts. And when the mind shifts, something physiologically may very well happen as well. But that's great that can happen. And that's a very good example of how one could overcome an illness at the same way, right? I am not going to have this problem. And by golly, you don't have the problem.
So the schizophrenic says, "I'm really Marty," but when the part of my brain says I'm Peter, I decide, no, I am Marty.
Right, so what we're doing is you're deciding, using this in a very practical sense, I am not Hannah, I am a child of God. I'm a daughter of God. I'm an enlightened being, right? So we make the switch.
Yes, and the schizophrenic says, yes, I am a daughter, I am the son of God, is Peter,
Right,
although my name is Marty. See, that is something that I have a little bit of.
I understand, of course.
I understand it in terms that the mind is everything.
Right.
Talk to the microphone.
Talk to the mic, please. Hold
Oh, I understand the fact that in the Course we know the mind is everything, but yet there is a physical, quote unquote, reality
Of course.
of a vibrational level in this dimension of Earth, of
I understand.
of material beingness.
But what you're really asking, what makes the shift? And you're talking about a physiological thing that happens that could facilitate that process. But ultimately speaking, it's the mind itself which has to shift, right? Which then would change something on a physiological level. But let's keep it the only thing that's really real is the mind, right? Which then can affect the brain, obviously, right? This is basic Mary Baker Eddy Christian Science healing stuff that we're talking about.
I'll tell my schizophrenic patient to shift.
Okay, you do that. See, but you're really right about another thing, which is one of the things that you really can't do, or that's really very difficult to do, impossible to do, is to make a decision for somebody else. We are all the deciders. And you've been a therapist for ever. 40 years, well, maybe 50 years, right? Okay, so you've been a therapist for all this time. You can offer advice, you can suggest guidance, you can try to help people understand why they're seeing things and doing things the way that they're doing, but you can't make them change.
Definitely.
That they have got to make that decision for themselves. I am going to give up smoking. And that is a decision that only the smoker can make, right? But once that decision is made, then you realize it works, and now you can apply it, and you can apply that same principle in other ways as well. That's what gets exciting, right? Let's go on and do a few more of these. Oh, you pass the mic down to Michael.
Just adding to what you're saying, you know how many shrinks it takes to change a light bulb? Just one, but the light bulb has to really, really, really want to change.
As I'm looking over in this direction, I see 4 psychotherapists sitting right in. Why is it that psychotherapists like to come to this class? I don't know.
We need help.
When they're,
Well, I think, but you know that this is true, and you know that this is the way things work, right? Art.
is that when you're speaking of the vibration of the brain and how that happens, The brain is just an antenna,
Yeah.
just like our DNA is just, but think of it as a radio station antenna.
Mhm.
So when the mind wants to, and as the Course says, the body is just a wholly neutral thing. It's like a car. You get in the car, you can make it go fast, slow, stop, blink the lights, whatever you want. The mind uses the body the same way we use a car. It just drives it around. This is just a puppet thing. So when the mind has a shift in its belief, it'll activate a certain part of the brain that will reflect that belief. It's that simple. And,
Yeah.
and for every emotion we have, there is a correlating chemical that the mind will make the brain, through the pituitary gland, make.
Yassine.
Hi.
Okay.
There are two very famous doctors. One of them we all know of, Dr. Sigmund Freud, and another we might not know of who died about 3 years ago, Dr. John Sarno. And they both dealt with something that they gave different names for. Sigmund Freud dealt with something called conversion. He would have a patient who was crippled and in a wheelchair, who could not walk or could not see,
All right.
and he would hypnotize them, and suddenly they could. And I'm not exactly sure what his conclusion was to that, but that something in the body, in the brain, shut down the ability to see or walk for some sort of psychological reason.
All right.
Dr. John Sarno dealt with people with back pain. And what he started noticing early in his career was that no one was ever getting better. They were operating on them, they were giving them therapies, and they'd get better for 3 months and then wandering back. And as time went on, he noticed that people who had huge back pain, and they'd give them an MRI, they'd show, oh, well, you have a slip this, you have that, you have this, that's why you have the pain. Well, he started finding that other people had all those things and had no pain. And over years, he cured thousands of people who claimed they had terrible back pain. They were almost cripples. By understanding that there was something in the brain, he even wrote a book called The Divided Mind, that something in our more ancient brain that triggered a lack of oxygen in a certain part of the body so that you would have pain, so that you didn't have to think about certain things that were very threatening to you, namely that you were filled with rage and maybe would kill someone. Later on, he found out that there were other ailments we have, like irritable bowel syndrome. He cured a lot of people with fibromyalgia, serious problems. And his emphasis, because there's a lot of talk here, how do you make the brain do this? Well, he said the prefrontal cortex has to override what the more primitive brain is doing. And that's what human beings have. This part of themselves that can go, wait a minute, before I panic because I have this pain in my back, I've got to think about this. And once he was able to make people understand that the autonomic nervous system had a mind of its own, okay, they were able to override this, change their behavior, not become so afraid, and start doing things they could never do before. I would suggest that the best book he has is The Mind-Body Prescription, where he describes all these ailments.
Thank you.
And so I think that both these doctors really focus on what we can do with this part of our brain that sometimes we let run amok.
Thank you. So what we could say is, I mean, just to use your terminology without talking about the physiology of the brain. I think one probably could get caught up in talking about the physiology of the brain. And we're not neurologists here or anything like that. But one of the things that you just said, Susan, was the higher mind, that's the words you used, right, could control the lower mind, right? So that's the thing that we're learning, is that there's another kind of mind which transcends the lower mind, to put it in words that we can all understand without referring to the brain. And we want to learn how to use that higher mind. The higher mind, by the way, in this particular case, is also, as I was just saying, the decider, the chooser, the one who chooses to see it differently, that decides And I'm keep using very practical illustrations. By practical illustrations, that I don't have to be heavy set. I could lose all this weight. Great. You can do it. But some mind has got to make the decision to do that. And once the mind makes a decision to do it, and then of course you need some practical principles to put into practice. But you put those practical principles into practice, that's the physical part of it, then it works. You actually get addicted to not eating. I mean, kids, the less you eat, the less you need to eat. That's just a good example of it, right? So then that changes everything. All right, one more. Now, by the way, really, Lynn, you do it pretty good. Hold the mic like we're right here.
Right
where
here?
People can,
Right here?
You're good.
Okay. I can't, Mundy, I love the way he put it. The unconditioned mind becomes the guru of the conditioned mind.
Right.
Yeah. So,
Good.
yeah.
Good. Of the conditioned mind, the mind being the habituated mind,
Right.
the stuck mind, the addicted mind, etc. Which sometimes people think we can't change. We can't change the way we see. We can't be better people. Well, you can. And there's plenty of proof of it because people do it. And they do it whether it's a disease that they're overcoming, whether they got peanut allergy, now they don't have peanut allergy, or whether it's I hate a certain group of people, I don't hate a certain group of people. That's all just nonsense. It was just stuff that's in the mind. Let's do a few more slides and then we're going to take our break. And we didn't get as far as I maybe hoped here, but that's okay. Thinking of your relationship as one with the universe, this is why it helps to remove the anthropomorphic stigma of thinking of God as a person with a body. That's what I'm going to kind of move us in that direction a little bit, right? Because we're talking about we're being one with the universe. There's a little problem in thinking about, because we tend to anthropomorphize God. So we need to be beyond that. This is something much. But on the other hand, there's nothing wrong with thinking of God as our loving Father or Mother or Creator or Spirit or whatever other kind of terminology that we want to use. So the ego's continued existence depend upon our belief in the ego. This is what we're talking about, a belief in the disease, belief in the back pain, belief in whatever it is that it's believing in, right? And on its importance of keeping separation real. If I have this pain, then the separation must be real because I really have this pain. And I don't think that there's any way I have to take a drug. Okay, that's physiological. And the drug works. Well, if the drug works, and there are a lot of stories of placebo effects. Remember just last time we were here, we had a physician with us who has written a book called Physician, Heal Thyself, and what she's been doing is doing a lot of study upon placebo effects, where people were told that here, this is going to change everything for you, and it does, but there's nothing there. But they believed that there was something there that could change everything. So we're bringing it back. The Course is always bringing it back to the mind itself and to the chooser, Charlie the chooser. So the problem comes in thinking that the outside makes a difference. For example, the color of one's skin, ethnicity or religion makes a difference. It doesn't make a difference. Remember years ago, we had an Irishman with us today. There was a terrible fighting going on between Catholics and Protestants in Ireland, and they're just neighbors and could be friends and could love each other. And I guess that's kind of calmed down now, has it not? Yeah. Because it was a decision. It didn't have to be that way. Why did this insanity have to exist? For some people were being killed because they were of one faith or another. So that's another way that our consciousness grows. We see that was an insanity. So What you want to get down to, I'm going to tell you the story of the man in the restaurant. I've told this story before, but for those who don't know it. I was once having dinner with a friend in a restaurant. This not very profound, but it is profound. Many years ago, and there was a couple sitting across, and you know how sometimes you can't help but hear the conversation at the next table? Even when you're not trying to pay attention, you still get what's going on at the next table. And the man had had a revelation that day, and he wanted to share it with his wife. He says, honey, you know what? I had a revelation today. He says, you know what? We're all just people here. And she said, do you think we should wallpaper or paint the bathroom? And he said, no, honey, you didn't hear me. You know, I had this revelation that, you know, we're all just people here. And she said, do you think it should be blue or yellow? And he said, no, honey, listen. We're all just people here. And that's we're all just people here. You know, there's absolutely no difference between anyone, except insofar as we see a difference. If you see a difference, well, then you've got that problem.
Decided for herself, let's paint it blue.
I have no idea what the conclusion. Then I realized that he was talking to me. Because I got it.
His wife did, that's why she ignored
Yeah. Well, it's made a good illustration, I tell you that, over the course of years. I've used it a few times. So let's do just one or two more slides. We're going to take a break. The kingdom of heaven is the dwelling place of the Son of God, who left not his Father and dwells not apart from him. Heaven is not a place or a condition, but merely an awareness of perfect one. I think one of the problems we have when we start talking about the brain is we're talking about a thing. We're talking about a physiological thing, and we really want to transcend all of that which is physical to understand how the mind works, right? I'll start with heaven. Heaven is not a place or a condition, merely awareness of perfect oneness, and the knowledge that there is nothing else, nothing outside this oneness, and nothing else within. We're at our break point, so let's do a break, okay?